Imagine an aircraft born from the crucible of global conflict, a machine so advanced it leapfrogged aviation technology by years, maybe even decades. Picture a bomber that could soar higher, fly farther, and carry a more devastating payload than almost anything before it. This is the story of the Boeing B-29 Superfortress, an aircraft that became synonymous with American air power in the later stages of World War II. A symbol of industrial might, technological prowess, and ultimately, world-altering destruction. Its shadow stretched from the drawing boards of Seattle to the ravaged cities of Japan, forever linking its name with the final, fiery chapter of the war in the Pacific. But the journey of the Superfortress was anything but simple. It was a saga fraught with peril, innovation, staggering costs, and decisions that echo even today. The B-29 didn't just appear out of thin air. Its origins lie in the strategic anxieties of the late 1930s. As war clouds gathered over Europe and Asia, the United States Army Air Corps, the forerunner to the Air Force, began to realize its existing bombers, like the venerable B-17 Flying Fortress, might not have the legs for a truly global conflict. What if Britain fell? How could America project power across the vast Pacific? They needed something more. Something with intercontinental reach, capable of carrying a significant bomb load over thousands of miles and flying high enough to evade enemy interceptors and anti-aircraft fire. This wasn't just about upgrading, it was about conceiving a whole new category of weapon. In late 1939, the Air Corps issued a demanding requirement for a hemisphere defense weapon, later formalized as Request for Data R40B. The specifications were ambitious, almost bordering on science fiction for the era. They called for a bomber capable of carrying 2,000 pounds of bombs over a staggering 5,333 miles, with a top speed of 400 miles per hour and a service ceiling that would put it above most contemporary threats. Boeing, already flush with the success of the B-17, took up the challenge alongside Consolidated, Lockheed, and Douglas. Boeing's entry, the Model 345, incorporated many lessons learned from the Flying Fortress, but pushed the technological envelope significantly further. One of the most revolutionary aspects was the decision to fully pressurize the crew compartments, the cockpit, bombardier's station, and the gunner's compartment in the rear. This was a game changer. Flying at altitudes above 30,000 feet, where the B-29 was designed to operate optimally, the air is thin and frigidly cold. Without pressurization, crews needed bulky oxygen masks and electrically heated suits, leading to fatigue, communication difficulties, and reduced efficiency on long missions. Pressurization created a more comfortable, controlled environment, allowing the crew to operate much more effectively. A long tunnel, also pressurized, connected the forward and aft compartments over the unpressurized bomb bays, allowing crew members to move between sections. A small comfort that meant a world of difference on grueling 14-hour missions. Another leap forward was the defensive armament. Instead of manually operated machine guns sticking out of windows, the B-29 employed a sophisticated remote-controlled system, the General Electric Central Fire Control System. Multiple turrets, typically 4, were studded across the fuselage, upper forward, upper aft, and lower aft, plus a tail gunner position. Each turret usually housed 2.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns. Gunners sat at dedicated sighting stations, using computerized optical sights to aim the guns. Small computers automatically calculated factors like airspeed, gravity, temperature, and lead deflection, making the system incredibly accurate against attacking fighters, at least in theory. A single gunner could potentially control multiple turrets, concentrating firepower on a single threat. It was complex, heavy, and required significant electrical power, but it offered vastly improved fields of fire and protection compared to older designs. Aerodynamically, the B-29 was a marvel. It featured a sleek, streamlined fuselage and enormous, high aspect ratio wings spanning over 141 feet. These wings provided excellent lift for high-altitude flight and long range, but also presented structural challenges. The aircraft was simply massive for its time. With a length of 99 feet, and a height of nearly 28 feet. Its empty weight was around 70,000 pounds, and fully loaded, it could tip the scales at over 135,000 pounds. Everything about it screamed advanced and expensive. The program cost, estimated at around $3 billion in 1940s money, actually exceeded the cost of the Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb. It was the single most expensive weapons project undertaken by the United States during World War II. However, this cutting-edge technology came at a steep price, particularly concerning the engines. The B-29 required immensely powerful engines to lift its huge weight to high altitudes and propel it across vast distances. The chosen power plant was the Wright 3350 duplex Cyclone, a massive 18-cylinder, air-cooled radial engine producing over 2,200 horsepower. 4 of these behemoths powered the Superfortress. But the R-3350 was rushed into production before all its kinks were worked out. Early models were notoriously prone to overheating, swallowing valves, and catching fire. The magnesium content in the crankcase made engine fires incredibly intense and difficult to extinguish, often leading to catastrophic wing failure. The problems became acutely apparent during the flight testing and initial production phase at Boeing's Wichita plant, a period grimly nicknamed the Battle of Kansas. Test pilots and engineers faced incredible risks. One notorious incident involved legendary Boeing test pilot Eddie Allen, who perished along with his entire crew when their B-29 prototype caught fire and crashed into a meatpacking plant in Seattle in February 1943. Modifications were constantly being made on the production line: improved cooling baffles, revised oil systems, fuel injection replacing carburetors on later blocks. But engine reliability remained a persistent headache throughout the B-29's early service life. Crews flew missions knowing that an engine fire could spell disaster miles from friendly territory. It's a testament to their courage and the desperate need for the aircraft that they pressed on. Let's delve deeper into the specifications that made the B-29 so formidable when everything worked as intended. Its operational range was typically around 3,250 miles, with a 5,000-pound bomb load, enabling it to strike targets deep within enemy territory from bases thousands of miles away. While the initial requirement aimed for 400 miles per hour, its realistic maximum speed was closer to 357 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, still significantly faster than most heavy bombers of the era. Its service ceiling could exceed 31,000 feet, putting it above the effective range of much Japanese flak and making interception difficult for many fighters, especially early in its deployment. The bomb load capacity was equally impressive. While designed for a nominal load of 20,000 pounds for shorter distances, it could carry varying configurations depending on the mission profile. For the later, low-level incendiary raids, this carrying capacity proved devastatingly effective. The 2 large bomb bays could accommodate conventional high-explosive bombs, incendiary clusters, or even aerial mines. And of course, specially modified B-29s would carry the single most destructive ordnance ever created, the atomic bomb. The central fire control system deserves a bit more explanation. Imagine 5 sighting blisters: top, front, left side, right side, and tail. Gunners occupied these stations, peering through gyroscopic sights. When a gunner tracked an enemy fighter, analog computers connected to the sights and the turrets crunched the numbers. These weren't digital computers like today, but complex electromechanical devices using Selson motors and amplifiers to transmit aiming data. The system compensated for the B-29's own movement, the target's movement, gravity drop, and even air density. The gunner essentially pointed his sight at the target, squeezed the trigger, and the system directed the appropriate turret or turrets to fire along the calculated trajectory. This allowed for coordinated defensive fire and theoretically reduced the need for gunners to be directly exposed in drafty open positions. While groundbreaking, the system was complex to maintain and sometimes vulnerable to electrical issues in the harsh operating environment. Its effectiveness was debated, particularly against fast, high-closing speed attacks, but it represented a major step towards automated aircraft defense. Comparing the B-29 to its contemporaries highlights its leap in capability. The B-17 Flying Fortress, a rugged and beloved workhorse, typically had a range of around 2,000 miles with a 4,500-pound bomb load and a ceiling of about 35,000 feet, though often operated lower. The British Avro Lancaster, a superb night bomber, could carry a massive bomb load up to 22,000 pounds for specialized bombs, but had a shorter range, around 2,500 miles with a typical load, and was primarily designed for night operations at lower altitudes. The B-29 combined long-range, high-altitude performance, impressive speed, and a heavy bomb load with advanced defensive systems and crew comfort features like pressurization, putting it in a class of its own among World War II bombers. The operational debut of the B-29 was challenging. The first combat missions were flown under the Sussex Bomber Command operating out of forward bases in China, supplied via treacherous flights over the Hump from India, an operation codenamed Matterhorn. Starting in June 1944, these B-29s targeted Japanese industrial facilities, primarily steelworks. However, the logistical nightmare of supplying fuel and bombs over the Himalayas severely limited the tempo and effectiveness of these raids. Furthermore, the initial high-altitude, daylight precision bombing strategy proved less successful than hoped against targets in Japan, hampered by unexpected high-altitude jet stream winds, persistent cloud cover, and teething problems with the aircraft themselves. Losses were incurred, and the results were often disappointing relative to the enormous effort involved. The strategic focus shifted dramatically with the capture of the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, in late 1944. These islands were much closer to Japan, roughly 1,500 miles away, eliminating the crippling logistical issues of the China bases and putting the B-29s within effective range of the Japanese home islands. Massive airfields were rapidly constructed, turning Tinian, in particular, into the busiest airport in the world. The Sussex Bomber Command was established here, initially under Brigadier General Haywood S. Hansell, a proponent of high-altitude precision bombing. However, the same factors that plagued the China missions, the jet stream tossing bombs off target, persistent cloud cover obscuring objectives, and ongoing engine issues, continued to limit success. Bombing accuracy from 30,000 feet remained poor. By early 1945, pressure was mounting from Washington to show more decisive results for the immense investment in the B-29 program. This led to a change in leadership and tactics. In January 1945, Major General Curtis LeMay took command of Zexifun Bomber Command. LeMay was a blunt, driven, and results-oriented commander, analyzing the failures of the high-altitude strategy and noting the vulnerability of Japanese cities, largely constructed of wood and paper to fire. He made a radical and controversial decision. He ordered the B-29s stripped of most of their defensive armament and ammunition to save weight and increase bomb load and performance. He then directed them to attack major Japanese urban centers at night, from low altitudes between 5,000 and 9,000 feet, using incendiary bombs. This shift was dramatic. Flying low and slow at night negated the B-29's high-altitude advantages, but also largely avoided the jet stream and cloud cover issues. It put the bombers within range of lighter anti-aircraft guns, but reduced warning time for Japanese defenses. The incendiaries, typically M69 napalm clusters, were designed to spread fire rapidly through the densely packed wooden structures. The first major test of this new tactic came on the night of March 9-10, 1945, against Tokyo. Over 300 B-29s descended on the city, unleashing nearly 1,700 tons of incendiaries. The result was a firestorm of unimaginable proportions. Fueled by strong winds, the fires raged out of control, incinerating nearly 16 square miles of the city. Estimates of the death toll vary wildly, but commonly cited figures range from 80,000 to over 100,000 people killed in a single night, with 1 million more left homeless. It was, by some measures, the single most destructive air raid in history, exceeding the initial death tolls of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. LeMay pressed the incendiary campaign relentlessly. Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, and dozens of other Japanese cities suffered similar fates in the following months. The B-29 systematically burned down Japan's industrial and urban centers, crippling war production and devastating civilian morale. While strategically effective in hastening the war's end, these firebombing raids remain deeply controversial, raising profound ethical questions about the targeting of civilian populations. LeMay himself acknowledged the brutality, famously stating later that he supposed if the U.S. had lost the war, he would have been tried as a war criminal. Beyond bombing cities, the B-29s also played a crucial role in strangling Japan's maritime supply lines through a massive aerial mining campaign codenamed Operation Starvation. Flying primarily at night, B-29s dropped thousands of acoustic and magnetic mines into Japanese harbors, shipping lanes, and strategic straits like the Shimonoseki Strait. This campaign proved incredibly effective, sinking or damaging hundreds of Japanese merchant ships and warships, drastically reducing imports of vital raw materials and food, and effectively blockading the home islands. Historians often point to Operation Starvation as a major, albeit less publicized, factor in Japan's eventual collapse. And then came the missions that would forever define the B-29 in public memory. Operating under absolute secrecy, the 509th Composite Group, commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, was formed specifically to deliver the atomic bomb. Their B-29s underwent significant modifications under the Silver Plate program. Most defensive turrets and armor were removed to save weight. The bomb bay was reconfigured to carry a single, massive bomb, either the Little Boy uranium bomb or the Fat Man plutonium bomb. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 piloted by Tibbets, named Enola Gay after his mother, took off from Tinian. Over Japan, it dropped Little Boy on the city of Hiroshima. The resulting explosion and firestorm destroyed much of the city and killed an estimated 70,000 to 135,000 people instantly or within months. 3 days later, on August 9th, another specially modified B-29, Bockscar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki, causing similar devastation and killing an estimated 40,000 to 80,000 people. 6 days after the Nagasaki bombing, Japan announced its surrender, formally signing the Instruments of Surrender on September 2, 1945, bringing World War II to an end. The B-29 Superfortress had delivered the final, terrible blows. The end of World War II did not mean the end of service for the B-29. It became the backbone of the newly formed Strategic Air Command, SAC, in the early post-war years, serving as America's primary nuclear delivery platform until the arrival of the larger Convair B-36 Peacemaker and the jet-powered Boeing B-47 Stratojet. Specialized variants continued to play important roles. The F-13, later redesignated RB-29, was a photo reconnaissance version, conducting clandestine surveillance flights over the Soviet Union and other potential Cold War adversaries, gathering vital intelligence. Other B-29s were converted into KB-29 aerial tankers, pioneering probe and drogue refueling techniques, and WB-29 weather reconnaissance aircraft, hunting typhoons and gathering meteorological data. There was even a bizarre experimental version, the EB-29, used to test carrying parasite fighters like the McDonnell XF-85 Goblin, intended to protect bomber formations. Interestingly, the Soviets were so impressed by the B-29 that when several examples made emergency landings in Soviet territory during the war, they were interned along with their crews. Stalin ordered the Tupolev Design Bureau to reverse engineer the B-29 completely. The result was the Tupolev Tu-4, codenamed Bull by NATO, a near-perfect, unlicensed copy, right down to replicating known flaws. The Tu-4 became the Soviet Union's first strategic nuclear bomber, giving them a credible long-range threat against the United States and significantly escalating Cold War tensions. The B-29 saw combat again during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. Initially, they were used for strategic bombing raids against targets in North Korea, similar to their World War II role. However, the emergence of the Soviet-built MiG-15 jet fighter changed the equation. The high-flying MiGs could easily intercept the relatively slower, propeller-driven B-29s, even at high altitudes. B-29 losses mounted, forcing SAC to switch primarily to nighttime bombing missions and interdiction roles, targeting supply lines and infrastructure, rather than heavily defended strategic targets. Despite the challenges, B-29s flew over 20,000 sorties during the Korean War, dropping some 200,000 tons of bombs. The war highlighted the increasing vulnerability of propeller bombers in the jet age, accelerating the transition to aircraft like the B-47 and the legendary B-52 Superfortress. By the mid-1950s, the B-29's frontline days were numbered. Most were retired from SAC service, though tanker and reconnaissance variants lingered a bit longer. The last operational flight of a USAF B-29 variant, a WB-29 weather aircraft, occurred in 1960. Nearly 4,000 B-29s were built, a staggering number for such a complex and expensive machine. What is the legacy of the Boeing B-29 Superfortress? Technologically, it was a triumph, pushing the boundaries of aircraft design in terms of size, range, altitude, and complex systems integration. Concepts pioneered on the B-29, like cabin pressurization and remote defensive systems, influenced bomber and transport aircraft design for decades. Its aerodynamic configuration laid the groundwork for future large Boeing aircraft. Strategically, its impact was immense. It was the key instrument that allowed the United States to project overwhelming air power against the Japanese home islands, bypassing costly island-hopping campaigns to some extent. The shift to incendiary tactics, while brutal, demonstrably crippled Japan's ability to wage war. And of course, its role as the delivery platform for the atomic bombs irrevocably changed warfare and global geopolitics, ushering in the nuclear age. However, this legacy is inextricably linked with controversy. The sheer destructive power unleashed by the B-29, particularly during the firebombing raids and the atomic attacks, raises enduring questions about the morality of strategic bombing and the targeting of civilian populations during wartime. The Superfortress remains a potent symbol of American power, technological achievement, and the terrible necessities, or perhaps terrors, of total war. Today, only a handful of B-29s survive. Two examples, Fifi, operated by the Commemorative Air Force, and Doc, restored by volunteers in Wichita, Kansas, have been painstakingly restored to flying condition. Seeing these giants take to the skies is a powerful reminder of the scale of engineering and human effort involved in their creation and operation, and the pivotal, often brutal, role they played in shaping the mid-20th century. The B-29 Superfortress wasn't just an airplane, it was a technological spearhead, a weapon of immense power, and a complex historical artifact whose story continues to fascinate and provoke discussion. So the B-29 Superfortress, a marvel of engineering born from necessity, plagued by fiery development, and ultimately wielding the power to reshape the world. Its missions forced a brutal end to a global conflict, but the methods remain debated. Was it the ultimate expression of wartime necessity, or a step too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. These machines tell incredible stories, and if you want to keep exploring the legends of military hardware and the history they forged, make sure you're subscribed. We've only just scratched the surface, and you won't want to miss where we head next.